Welcome to the Tzurba M'Rabanan Hilchot Shabbat Program with Rabbi Shalom Rosner. Tzurba is a revolutionary halacha sefer which guides you through over 300 topics in Jewish law in a unique signature style. In this weekly series specifically, Rabbi Shalom Rosner learns through the Tzurba Hilchot Shabbat volumes, helping us all master the Halachot of Shabbat in just 2 years. Tzurba volumes are available for purchase worldwide on Amazon. And to learn more about Tzurba, or for those in Eretz Yisrael looking to purchase volumes, please head over to tzurbaolami.com. For more information, see the description below. And now, Rabbi Shalom Rosner.
Okay, let's get into the next malacha of Kosheir. This is Shiur Dalid in the Tzurba M'Rabanan Volume number 21. As we get into the Mervis family volume, again, the Lax family volumes of the Tzurba. And we're talking about very lamaisa malachas in this volume, all about Ohel and Malabain and Topher and Korea, and now we get into Kosheir and Matir. Kosheir and Matir, we'll be doing mostly kosher, but they're kind of balanced from each other and the opposites of each other. Kosher, tying knots. This has to do with tying garbage bags and tying the gartel on a Sefer Torah and tying shoes and tying an apron. So what is the background for this? We're going to start on page 175. As we will see, we're going to have to come up with 3 categories of kosher. We will split this year, again, kosher, as we do most of this year, into 2. And we start off with the Shabbos Daf Ayin Dalet in source number 1. On page 175, where was kosher in the Mishkan? Where was kosher in the Mishkan? So the Gemara asks, Shiur Mishkan Heichahave, where was kosher in the Mishkan? Amar Rava, Shekin kosher Mitei Sahalim. The first suggestion is that when they had tents and they had to tie the pegs down, they put the pegs into the ground, they tied the tent to the peg. So the tying that you tied the tent onto the peg, that's where kosher was in the Mishkan. Says the Gemara Amalei Abaya, Hahu kosher Amanas Lahatirhu. But that's not a permanent kosher. That's a kosher amanas lahatir, with in mind to undo it. And it could be any day. Remember, Hashem told them when to move, so it could be 1 day, it could be 10 years, you have no idea. But it could be amanas to untie. It's not meant to be permanent. So El Amar Abaya, Shekain Erge Yurios, Shenifsaka Lahenima Koshernosa. Try number 2, says Abaya, when there was a rip, there was a tear in one of the curtains, they had to tie the strings together. And maybe that's what the kosher is. The Gemara says, okay, tiras to kosher, that helps with kosher. Mat Michael Meimer, where do you have untying in the Mishkan? So Ella Amar Rava Vitem Rabbi Loi Shkein Tzidei Chilazon kosher Matirin. The maskana is when they had nets to catch the animal chilazon, to use its dye for different materials in the Mishkan, they had to tie the nets together, untie the nets, and put other two nets connected to each other. But that's where it was. Kshiras of the nets of the chilazon. And Rashi explains there that kosher amanas lahatir would not be a malacha that would be chayiv. So that can't be the source. So kosher and matir, and Rashi explains on the top of the next source. On the next page, all the nets were made with knots. They were permanent. They were meant to be there forever. Sometimes you have to take strings from this one, and onto this one. Matir mikan, the kosher mikan. So where was kosher and matir in the Mishkan? Again, every malacha of Shabbos has its source in the Mishkan. So where was kosher and matir in the Mishkan? It was by the traps of the chilazon to make them bigger, to make them smaller. So we will see in the malacha of kosher, there are 3 levels. Other malachas too, but right now we're focused on kosher. We will get into permanent knots, which are aser deoraisa, biblically aser, non-permanent knots, which are aser d'Rabbanan, and then less than non-permanent knots, and those are the ones that you're allowed to tie on Shabbos mutter. 3 categories. The problem is that the Mishnah and the Gemara gives examples, but doesn't say what the rule is. It says these are examples. The question is, the Rishonim have to figure out, so what is the common denominator between these examples that make it da'araisa, that make it d'Rabbanan, that make it mutter? So if you look in the Mishnah in the 15th parak, in parak Elu Ksharim, the 15th parak in Shabbos, source number 3, Ve'elu Ksharim shechayav alem, these are the Ksharim, the knots that you're chayiv for. Chayiv, remember, always means da'araisa. Kesher HaGamalim, the knot of the camels, that you put you knot the rope to a ring in the camel's nose. The kesher asapanim, and the kesher and the knot, a sailor's knot, that you tie the rope onto the boat. That's meant to be permanent, never being undone. That's daraisa. Yesh l'chaksharim shein chayavan alem kesher galam kesher asapanim. Then the Mishnah says there are other knots that are not on the same level. They're not daraisa. They're d'Rabbanan. And the Mishnah doesn't say any examples of that. And then the Mishnah says some cases are even allowed. Kosheris isha mafteach chaluka v'chuti svacha. A woman is allowed to tie the edge of her robe or the strings of her hairnet, v'shapsikya of her apron, v'ritzuos min of a sandal, and her shoes. So the Mishnah tells us that there are these daraisa knots, which are the camel knots and the boat knots. There are some durabanans that are in the middle. We don't know any examples. And then a woman's allowed to tie her apron on Shabbos. So what exactly is are the rules here? So again, the Gemara goes through Kufyat Beis, tries to give us some examples. It's just that we just don't know how to understand these examples. So the Brisa says in Kufyat Beis, some sources say that knotting is daraisa, some are durabanan, some are mutter. So the Gemara says it's 3 different types of knots. So the Gemara says on the 4th line of source number 4, minal lo kasha. There's no stira when it comes to minal. Hadik tani chayev chatos. When do we say it's also daraisa to tie a knot? Bida ushchafi, a shoemaker's knot. A shoemaker's knot which holds the whole shoe together, that's going to be daraisa. Pater avalasar bidurabanan. Pater avalasar, those are the rabbis' knots. When they tie their shoes, it's a rabbinic knot, somewhere in the middle. Mutter lechadchilak bidibnei mechuza. What's mutter lechadchila? The mechuza people, the bnei mechuza, they are meticulous with their dress and they tie and untie every day, as we'll see. So three different categories. The question is, how exactly do we translate these examples to rules? So this is a major machlokas rishonim. The Rif and the Rambam versus Rashi and the Tur. Machlokas rishonim, what is required for a daraisa? And there's a kul and a chumrah for each of the shitas. So first we'll do the Rif and the Rambam. Rif and the Rambam say that there are 2 ingredients for a not to be asa daraisa. If you have both ingredients, it's daraisa. If you have either ingredient, it's durabanan. If you have neither ingredient, then it's mutter. What are those 2 ingredients? Says the Rif, says the Rambam, permanence and professional. You need both of those. Professional is objectively the type of knot. Permanence has to do with the person's kavana. How long is it supposed to be there? So the Rif says, and the Rambam says, that's how they understand these Gemaras. Hadetani, says the Rif in source number 5. Hadetani chayev b'minal to ushchafi. When it says a shoemaker's knot is going to be chayev daraisa, demaisa umanhu, it is professional, v'kesher shal kayamahu, and it's permanent. Both of those. Hadetani pater avalasur, and that which it says pater avalasur b'derabanan, those are the rabbis' knots, demaisa hedyotu, because those are simple knots. Anybody can make them. Elashu kesher shal kayama, but it is meant to be permanent. That's how the Rif reads the Gemara. So you have one factor. Permanence, but not professional, is going to be darabanan. Leficha pader avalasar. V'hadatani mutar l'chadchila. What's mutar? B'tebnei mechuza. Kegon ritzuos sheyotzos migufo shel minal. Those are the straps that go out of the shoe. V'kosheir also ala regel, and you wrap it on the leg. So those are not professional. Those are not permanent. So therefore, lav ma'isuma v'lav kesher kayama. That's the sheet of the Rif. And that's also the sheet of the Rambam. The Rambam says, again, 3 categories. The Daraisa category, 2 requirements, professional and permanent. The Rabbana category, either professional or permanent. And the 3rd category, that's mutter, neither. That's the sheet of the Rambam and the Rif. Let's read the Rambam. Source number 6, Parak Yud in Hilchot Shabbos. HaKosheir kesher shel kayamavu ma'isa uman chayiv. If somebody ties a permanent knot and it is a professional knot, that's an Issa Daraisa on Shabbos. Gon kesher kamal v'kesher asapanim. V'kisher v'ritzuos minol v'sandal. Shekosher ratzanim, the shoemakers that they tie to hold the shoe together, and it's going to be there forever. Aval HaKosheir kesher shel kayama ve'eino ma'isa uman patur. But if it is permanent but not professional, the Rambam says it's an Issa D'Rabanan. V'kesher she'eino shel kayama ve'eino ma'isa uman mutar l'kasher l'chadchila. If it's neither l'chadchila, and the Rambam does say explicitly the other way too. Kol kesher she'eino shel kayama. If it's not permanent, im kasher kesher uman areza aser. Professional is still going to be Issa D'Rabanan. So this is the sheet of the Rashi of the Rambam and the Rif. You need 2. Right, both both are daraisa. Either one is darabanan. Neither is mutter. Rashi, no. 3 categories, but in a different way. According to Rashi, there's only one factor. There's only one factor according to Rashi, and that is permanence. Permanence is a factor. You're chayav to tie a permanent knot, even if it is not professional. Says the Rashi. Ushchafi. What's the ushchafi? The shoemaker. What does he quote? Hukayam la'olam. Kayam la'olam. Any permanent knot. One is chayav for. It's not permanent. It's going to be durabanan if it's semi-permanent, and if it's not permanent at all, then it's going to be mutter. Right? That's what the Rashi says. Bidrabanan, that's the drabanan. Kesher shel kayama lo have. Shebishas hatit matir noso v'kosher noso b'dochek. Right, when it's muddy outside, they'll untie it. And Bnei Mechuza want to untie it lahatiro arvis. The Rosh quotes the Rif and holds like Rashi. So it's Rashi and the Rosh versus the Rambam and the Rif. So in this Machlokas Rishonim translates into Machlokas B'chamer and the Ramah. And as we'll see what we paskin. Right, the Shulchan Aruch says, Shin Yud Zayin, that's the Siman, that's Kosheir and Matir. Shin Yud Zayin, source number 8. The Shulchan Aruch quotes the Shita of the Rambam. HaKosheir Kesher Shel Kayama V'u Maisa Uman, both permanent and professional chayiv. Aval HaKosheir Kesher Shel Kayama Ve'eno Maisa Uman Pater. Either or is Asur D'Rabanan. The Yesh Cholkim, says the Ramah, some argue and say there's only one factor. Shesvir Luhu to call Kesher Shel Kayama Afilu Shel Hedyot Chayav and Alav. Any permanent knot, even if it's non-professional, it's going to be daraisa. It's going to be daraisa. So we're going to have to figure out what exactly is a knot, right? Because any permanence of any knot is going to be daraisa for Rashi. The Shulchan Aruch continues. The Kesher Sheinu Shel Kayama, the top of 179. The Kesher Sheinu Shel Kayama ve'enu ma'isa umam mutal kasher l'chadchila. Neither is mutal l'chadchila. V'chein le'ni hatara. So the Rama adds, we know hatara, untying and tying go together. The Kol Kasher Sheinu Shel Kayama Im Kasher Kesher Uman Arisa Aser. The Shulchan Aruch says if it's a professional knot, it's still going to be Aser D'Rabanan. So from the Hemshech of the Ramah, it seems that right the Ashkenazi custom is to be machmir, based on both views, and we pass in that way. We're machmir like both shitas, meaning if it's only permanent, we're machmir like Rashi. Maybe it's daraisa, and if it's not permanent but it's professional, or mach like the Rambam, maybe it's a lesser D'Rabanan, because it's still professional, even if it's not permanent. And that is why we don't tie any permanent or professional knot. Rav Simcha ben Cohen in the Shabbos Home summarizes. According to the Ramah, it's thus prohibited to tie any permanent knot. Period. That's Rashi. Whether professional or not. Number 2, any professional knot. That's because of the Rambam and the Rif, whether permanent or temporary. Any knot that's meant to remain in place for more than 24 hours, we'll have to see the Shiur. So that is what the Ramah seems to paskin. Rav Avadia says, no, I'm going straight like the Shulchan Aruch. Rav Avadia paskin like the Shulchan Aruch, and that is you need both. If you have only one or the other, it's D'Rabanan. If you just have permanent, it's only D'Rabanan. It's only D'Rabanan. That's why there's a difference sometimes between a D'Rabanan and a Daraisa for Kavod Abrios, for Tzara Gadol. But that's what Rav Avadia says in source number 11. HaKosher Kesher Shel Kayama ve'eno ma'isa uman. If somebody ties permanent and not professional, going to kosher chevel bidli shetali bikvias al piabar. You tie a rope to a pail that's going to go into the well. L'shobo mayim bo'ofen tamidi. It's going to be there for a while. HaKosher rests in b'fi behema, or you're going to put a rope in front of a place where the animal is. Any of these, they're not professional, but they are permanent. Avishim Sherm Shel Kayama, they're also midrabanan. Also midrabanan. HaKosher Kesher Shu Maisa Uman Ve'eno Kesher Shel Kayama. If it's professional and not Maisa and not permanent, again, D'Rabanan, one or the other. So this is the Machlokas Rishonim between the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah as well. So now, what does permanent mean? That's our next question. What does permanent mean? What does professional mean? Right? This year is laying down the groundwork for everything that we'll discuss in the next year. Will be tying shoes and making your tie and a single knot and a double knot and a bow. So we'll get to all of that in the continuation in the second year. But this is laying down the groundwork for everything that we're it's going to follow. So what does permanent mean? So the Beis Yosef quotes a Machlokas Rishonim. If you're medayik in the words of Rashi, sounds like that it's D'Rabanan to tie any knot that's left for a week. It sounds like from Rashi, less than a week is mutter. That's nothing. A week to a month is also D'Rabanan. More than a month is Daraisa. That's Shita number 1 that the Beis Yosef says. Rashi sounds like, don't leave yet, right? We're not paskening that way. But that's what the Beis Yosef says in source 12. He says, what does it sound like from Rashi? Pirish Rashi b'Gemara, Gaviyesh Ksharm She'en Chayav Aleim, Klomar Alav Yisura Ika. So how do you determine what's permanent? Remember, according to Rashi, there's only one factor, permanent. As long as it's a minimal definition, it's called a knot, that's all. If it's going to be permanent, it's going to be daraisa. L'chein nearly says the Beis Yosef in Das of Rashi. Kol she'ena omilas kayim shiva yamim, anything that's not going to last for a week, mikri osi latiro b'chol yom, that's called being undone within 24 hours. V'shari, it's mutter. V'lama came Rabbeinu midapirish Rashi. Sha'asol chadchila l'kash risham b'rei sha'amim sheminiach shavua. Rashi's lashon, because sometimes you'll leave it there for a week. V'gam kasav upam mishum kayim Shabbos. Alma the omi l'skayim Shabbos achas pater avalasar. A week is asur d'Rabbanan. Ubebatzer mehachi lek yisur. Less than a week is mutter. So it's definitely yesh alma lismoch if in a difficult situation you have this, as long as it's less than a week. Gabi Avne, we'll get to. Let's say if you have a gartel. Now most gartels and shuls are clips, but if you have a tie that's going to last till next Shabbos, that Shabbos mincha, there's something to talk about, something to think about. And what if it's a Rosh Chodesh Torah by Shabbos after mincha? So these are things to talk about. I'm in the middle of a 12. You see, Shabbos or Chodesh. According to the first version, Rabbi Yosef assumes less than a week is mutter, a week to a month is asur d'Rabbanan, more than a month is da'araisa. But the Beis Yosef then quotes other Rishonim that give a more stringent definition. And they say that if it's 8 days, it's already permanent. That's already daraisa. He quotes from the Maria Buhav. Matir Berachas Chaim b'Shem Rabbeinu Peretz to call Kosheir she'omed ches yamim below atar. It's going to last for 8 days. Nikra Kosheir shekayama. So you got to bump everything down. 8 days is already daraisa. So the Beis Yosef says, I guess less than that is still going to be d'Rabbanan. So what's going to be mutter? Within 1 day, 24 hours. That's what the Beis Yosef assumes. If you say it's daraisa for 8 days, then the d'Rabbanan has to be less than that, and the mutter has to be even less than that. And that's what the Ramah quotes both of these opinions. Both of these opinions of the Beis Yosef. What does permanent mean? And we are machmir, right? We generally try to be machmir and do not tie anything, as we'll see, that will be there for more than 24 hours. Says the Ramah in source 14, Reishin Yazayin, V'yesh Omer, to call Kosheir shenush asui lahatir ba'osu hayom atzmo mikri shel kayama. 24 hours, and remember, according to Rashi, it makes no difference, professional, not professional. It's only about the kavana of the person. So the Ramah says, as long as if it's within 1 day, v'yesh mekilin lomer dat shivayama lo mikri shel kayama. And some are mako up to 7 days. But generally we try to be machmir. Even according to, again, the Chamer opinion, within 24 hours is okay. 24 hours, if I'm going to tie something for within 24 hours, that is for sure okay, as long as it's non-professional. If it's professional, even within 24 hours, remember we said that's the Rambam and the Rif, we're machmer both shitas. We're machmer against that to assume that that's the Rabbanan. But if it's non-professional, and within 24 hours, that's mutter. Says the Mishnah Berurah in 15. Ba'osa yom atzma el lamachar. Aval masui lahatir below motzi Shabbos, lo mikri shel kayama klal. If it's Shabbos afternoon to motzi Shabbos, that's not kayam at all. Umur delachanchila. Miyu im kosher belel Shabbos kodesh. Vasui lahatir b'yom Shabbos atzmo. Avagav de'in mamish ba'oso hayom. Come up with the shari, right? Even if it's, let's say, before Shabbos till on Shabbos. That's a different halachic day. Doesn't matter. 24 hours. 24 hours is the key. So Lamaisa, to sum up, as he sums up here on the top of 182, the poskim quote the machlokes about a non-permanent knot, about tying on Shabbos. Some say it's up to 24 hours. Some say it's up to a week. The Bir Halacha says that there is a smach, there is a source that seems to say that maybe we could be makel, like the more makel opinion. Lamaisa, we're not. But he quotes that there's the Shulchan Aruch seems to say that you could tie the rope onto the pail. That lachar is going to last for more than 24 hours. So he says maybe that Shulchan Aruch seems to say that one can be mako, but again, we generally try to be machmir. Try to be machmir in this regard. If you look in Rav Ovadia, continuing, top of 183, he says that any knot that's not meant to last for 7 days, a week, is already called non-permanent. And he says maybe it's based on a svek sveika. Again, we said, lachatchila, we for sure should be machmir. We're machmir like both Shitas and the Rishonim, the Chumras of the Rambam and the Rif and the Chumras of Rashi. What does that mean? The Rambam and the Rif is that even if it's non-permanent, but if it's professional, it's still going to be asur d'Rabbanan. Right, according to Rashi, that's mutter. But it's still going to be asur Rabbanan. But we also pass on like Rashi that even if it's just permanent, not professional, that might be daraisa. But and then what does permanent mean? So we just said 2 days, within 24 hours or within a week. So Rav Ovadia says maybe you can make it like that. Oh, that makel opinion within a week. Why? Svek sveika. Svek Sveika. This is classic Rav Ovadia. He, as a posek, often uses Svek Sveika. Maybe the halacha is like this person, maybe the halacha is like that person. I mean, not Svek Sveika in Lumdis, Svek Sveika in Psak. Says the Rav Ovadia in 18. Umeyate Yishlono Svek Sveika lahakel. Shema halacha karif harambam. Shakol she'ino ma'isa uman. If it's not professional, afilu asulas kayim zman ma, even if it's going to last, al kolpanim matshiva yem model hadchila. It's still mutter if it's within 7 days. V'yim salam Rashi. Version, even want to say like Rashi in the Rush, maybe within 7, right, is already called the Oso Yom. But the Svek Sveika b'Derabanan to Mishra Shari. Okay, this is a sheet that he has. If you look, can one use the same heter with untying? If it not maybe untied within the minimum time, so the Aruch HaShabbos discusses this. If you have an aniva gavi kesher, so we'll have to come back to that when we get up to shoes. Where does tying come up? Just one lamaisa case, tying a garbage bag. Right. Often we finish the garbage in the kitchen, we want to tie it up, and then we're going to put it in the garbage. So often we don't want to just leave it open because we don't want it to spill out and pour out as we take it out. So we'll tie a knot. So tying the first, you take 2 sides, and then you twist it once through. That's for sure fine. That's not a knot. That's going to open in a second. But if you do a double, so that's an issue. Say, most of the poskim, if you look in source 20, right, he quotes this from Rav Karelitz in the Dirshu Mishnah Berurah, that's a knot that's going to last forever. According to Rashi, that could be an Issa Daraisa. The Kosheir she'osem oso lizman mesuyam, says the again, the Dirshu Mishnah Berurah. A kesher that's going to last for a certain amount of time. Uk'she'over azman ve'ein ba'ot tzorich, when there's no nima shlichim oso kamosh shula ashpa. It's not that I need it closed. Once it's in the garbage, I don't really care. But still, you're tying it. So Rav Karelitz says, that's a kesher shekayama. Kivan shebefoal ein hu omed lios mutar laolam. It's never going to be untied. Like we discussed in the last shiur about if you the old types of diapers, the sticky diapers, not the Velcro. If you have sticky after the child soils himself and you're putting away the diaper to throw in the garbage, sometimes you want to close it up to make a nice neat package. So you'll sticky it again. So that could be a problem because that's meant to be there forever. But there is a kula of Rabbi Shalom Rosner. Shalom Zalman, quoted here in the Mincha Shlomo, says that really by the garbage, you don't care. Once it's in the garbage, you don't really care if it opens. So is that called shel kayama? You're knotting it, and it's not going to be undone, but it maybe yesh makam lahakal. Reisi b'shelas v'shuvas maral diskin. He quotes for the maral diskin. Shemis tapek, who wasn't sure. If somebody is not going to untie the kesher, but doesn't really care about its having knotted. Because of ksas yesh lavi raya, maybe a little raya from the Yuma. The tiknu chazal sheyiksher gam bein karnav. We know when Chazal said with the ribbon that they used to put on the in public, and then they tied it on the edge of the Sir Lazazel and tied it on the rock and tied it out. So the heichal, all the different stages, but it says they tied it. So they tied it. Okay, let's say on the horns of the seir, it's never going to be untied. So so maybe here too, mitzad asvara nearly is daiti demashazorko la ashba gamkin chashav eno shel kayama. You're not interested in having it, so it's an important sav lahakel to know that if somebody does it, they're not violating according to everybody. Or Shlomo Zalman has that heter. What happens if there's a type of knot that is usually tied for a long time, but you're not doing it for a long time? Does it go by you? Does it go by everyone? So the Taz, the Bir Halacha quotes the Taz. The Taz holds that it always goes by the subjective intention of each person in the case. If you're tying this for less than 24 hours, that's all. And the Bir Halacha is not so comfortable with that. V'zeh espale ala Taz. Shekasa deladas harash v'hatur, according to the Rosh of the Tur and Rashi, hakol toli b'das ha'adam hakosher l'chud. Remember, it's all about permanence. Goes by the person b'kavana. Dim daitu sheishar kein la'olam. If a person has a mind that should be there forever, havi kesher kayama. V'im lizmanu padar v'laser. V'mei daitu atul yomam mutal adchila. The 3 different levels that we hold of. But the Bir Halacha says it's hard to say that if you have a knot that many people tie permanently, just because you have kavanah to untie, that it's going to be mekel. Even if you take the daraisa knots of the camels and the boats, you're going to tell me if you have kavanah to undo that 24 hours? Says the Bir Halacha, I don't think so. Fini has daiti tzorchi and gadol bazeh. Denira, the kesher shedarko shel ha'olam la soso bekfios. If you have a knot that everybody ties for a longer amount of time, lo azlina basa machshavas kosher levata shem kesher b'menu, that's still going to be usher. That's still going to be usher. You don't go by the kula of the tas. So that's all about what does permanent mean. So now, what does professional mean? Right, those are the two tzaddim. What does permanent mean, and what does professional mean? So the Shiltei Giborim says, right, one of the great Rishonim, Rabbi Shua Boaz Lebeis Baruch, in the back of the Gemara, we don't know. We don't know. What does a professional knot mean? Again, the Gemara gives examples. The Mishnah gives examples, but we don't know exactly. And therefore, basically, if it might be, if it's something that we call a knot, that's it. Right? We have no idea what Kosheir professional means. Says the Shiltei Giborim in 23, the Kosheir umalon is barely heitev. I don't know. Heichu. Mionir milashon alfasi. Who Kosheir kosher so adak heitev. It has to be something tight. That's all. Tight. Mikan nirali. So he says, whenever you have a knot on top of a knot, you got to be careful. Matir and if you have a double knot, don't untie it. Even if it's meant to be undone within 24 hours, if it's professional, remember the Rambam, the Rif, professional is also asur d'Rabbanan. So we don't know if it's a strong knot that holds as a Kosheir amitz. The Shiltei Giborim says you have to be careful. And the Ramah quotes this Chumrah. And therefore, one has to not tie any type of knot that's going to be tight, because then it's going to be a chashash of being a ma'aser uman. Yesh omer, yesh lizar, shlo lahatir shum Kosheir, or untie. Shu shnei ksharim ze al ze. De'enanu b'kiyim eze mikri Kosheir shel uman. We don't know. The afilu b'she'eno shel kayama, also the kosher, right? If it's permanent, even if it's professional, even if it's not permanent. Again, makam tsar, where there's a need, you have a shoe or something on, you can't get off unless you untie it, and it's a double. So then makam tsar lo gazru, if we're not sure of that suffix. The Ramah adds that this issue about ma'aser uman, you not know what it is even if you have one string. It doesn't have to be two strings, two knots. The Ramah, that Shin Yud Zayin Aleph, that is the if that we've been talking about the whole Shiur. But if you make one, it's like Shnei Ksharim. It doesn't. It's still going to be machmir with a double knot and the single knot. The Rabbi Abba Shaul says the one doesn't have to accept the chumrah of the Ramah, and you could tie a simple double knot that will be untied the same day. Again, the Ramah says we don't know what it is based on that Shiltei Giborim. Rabbi Abba Shaul in Orlat Zion says maybe if it's a simple double knot that's going to be untied that day, we're going to have to get to what we call double knotting shoes. That'll be our next time. We'll get to that. L'chei nira sheish lahatir likshar or lahatir shnei ksharim b'Shabbos b'magam she'enu shel kayama elom lahatir bo bayom. Right, if you're going to untie it that day, then it's okay. Number one, shaldash Rashi v'Rash kol she'esh kayama mutter. Rashi and the Rashi say it's mutter. Mitzad echad. Again, the Sephardi posek of two kulas, not a sveka, but two kulas. Number one, if the halacha is like Rashi and the Rashi, it's for sure mutter. And number two, even according to the Rif and the Rambam, the Sfir Lushim hu ma'aser uman aser, maybe this is not a ma'aser uman. Right, so for both of those reasons, one would be able to untie. But again, the Aruch HaShabbos says we try to be machmir with any type of knot, not to untie it if it's possible. That it could, we don't know, like that Shiltei Giborim. And that's what the Aruch HaShabbos summarizes. Kasva Poskim sheyesh lizar, page 189. Yesh lizar shalo likshar v'lo lahatir kesher agabi kesher af shkasher kosher oslo zman katzar. You shouldn't untie matir a knot on a knot, a double knot, even if when you tied it you had in mind to take it out within 24 hours. Mishum dezeo kesher amitz, it's strong. The efshar shu ma'aser uman. And it's possible that it's professional. We don't know what's a ma'aser uman. Makam tsar, muter lahatir. Makam tsar. Then Kasva Poskim, he quotes even one string, and then two strings kind together. So that's why we generally are machmir. Based on this, the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says, so let's say a woman has let's say a bandana or some type of head covering, a tichel, and she's going to tie it in the back, because sometimes a woman will make a double knot in the back. So it says the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, maybe she shouldn't do that. Or maybe tying the side of a shirt or a dress or a blouse or a shoulder or something. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says, we have to be machmir for this. It's a double knot, and we don't know, like the Aruch HaShabbos, like the Ramah, like the Shiltei Giborim, so maybe we have to be worried about this. Right? And therefore, we have to tell the women. So the Shmir Shabbos says, we're not talking about those kinds of knots. if it's clothing that's put on, that's going to be undone, it's understood that that's not kayama and that's not a professional knot. Shmir Shabbos quotes Shlomo Zalman that he heard from Shlomo Zalman that a double knot to tie a headscarf, no problem. Shamati, source number 30. The women tie the double knot in the back. That's not tight. It's not tight. It's going to come out when you can undo it in a second. Therefore, it's not a problem of in that case. But a garbage bag, Halacha writes, and as we saw before, could be a serious issue. One final point, and that is a machlokas based on a Rambam. There's a Rambam that writes, it's quoted in the footnotes on the bottom of page 191, that kosher also applies by twining string. Twining, not making a knot. What if I have two strings and I twine them together? That's a tolda of kosher, says the Rambam. So where does this come up? Twist ties. They're not as common as they used to be. But twist ties, as you go to the bakery, you get a challah with a twist tie, two metal, right, a metal thread inside a plastic, and you twist tie it. So is that a problem of kosher? So that's a machlokas. Based on that Rambam, some say that, this is kosher, and therefore, instead of twisting it, rather you should just wrap around the edges. And others say that's Rambam's talking about cases about twining thread that you want there to remain. Here, it's meant to be done and undone. You might have the heter of derech tashmisho. It's meant to be done and undone, and therefore it wouldn't be a problem. But once you know that there's a chumrah that some have regarding the twist ties. So this is all background, the basis for the malacha. And next time we'll have to get into all the lamaisa cases of kosher.